Hi, everybody. Welcome to Word Focus for this week. And we're just going to continue our series on generosity. So, this Sunday, Pastor Mylene preached a great message about responding to God's generosity. And it comes from us understanding what matters to the heart of God when it comes to giving and living a generous life. His nature is that He is generous. He has always been a giving God, a giving Father to us. And because He has placed that same nature in us, it's also innate in us to be able to give naturally out of the abundance of our hearts. Although it takes practice to do that. It's not an overnight thing, and we grow in this spiritual discipline until it becomes a delight to do it. I remember when I was in kids' church as well, when I first learned about giving. And when I was little, it's something that I had to do every Sunday because it was part of the program, because our pastor used to tell us to do it. As I gotten older, I realized that it's something that God actually tells us to do because He delights in our prosperity, and God intends for us to prosper in all things, in everything that we do. So much so that He provided a way for us to continue this pattern of generosity and prosperity in our lives. And He made that available through sowing and reaping. In the book of Genesis, God mentions that as long as the earth is here, as long as the earth endures, sowing and reaping is also there. Seed, time, and harvest. And sometimes the time element just really takes time and there's going to be a lot of waiting involved. But whatever you sow, there will be surely a harvest of it. And that's the assurance we have when we understand that when we give, it will be given back to us. But that's not the goal in giving, because Jesus teaches a higher perspective. In Matthew chapter 6, He actually provides a blueprint for us on how to think like heaven, because we are not of this world. And because there are principles of the kingdom of God that we must abide by as we live on this earth so that we can live empowered and victorious lives by the grace of God. He teaches us how to steward well our resources. And those two things, generosity and stewardship, they go together. Because when God provided that pattern for us already to prosper and to gain, not only wealth, but the riches, the inheritance that we have in Him. And that includes peace. That includes joy. That includes living in wholeness and living in abundance. Everything of this world belongs to the Lord. David actually understood that well when he was building the temple of God. And he wrote an entire chapter about giving praises to the Lord. And I'm going to read a portion of it in 1 Chronicles 29:14-15 in the New Living Translation. It says here, "But who am I and who are my people that we could give anything to you? Everything we have has come from you, and we give you only what you first gave us. We are here for only a moment, visitors and strangers in the land as our ancestors were before us. Our days on earth are like a passing shadow, gone so soon without a trace." But what David was simply saying is, Lord, who am I that we can give all of these things to you when you own the entire universe? And we're only able to respond to God because He gave us first. So our life of generosity, out of our nature from a generous God, which is part of His faithfulness and character and who He is, right? We can only give to Him because everything is worship. Our generosity is worship. And He also has enabled us to be a good steward of it. So going back to Matthew 6, I'm going to read from Matthew 6:19 up until 24, and you can read with me. Because here Jesus teaches us about the heavenly perspective that we should have. Because in giving and in our generosity, again, not just with our wealth, but also with our time, and even with our service, even with our words, more so with our forgiveness and the grace that we extend to other people as well. It must always, always be a matter of the heart. Our heart is so important to the Lord. In verse 19, Jesus says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." If you're going to take inventory right now of where your heart is, it's going to be easy to do that if you see where you are directing your efforts, where you see you're directing the flow of even your wealth, your finances, even your time. Where are you giving your time? And this is just really to help you to evaluate yourself. We need heart checks from time to time. Yes? And so what Jesus is saying here is that if your heart and if your whole mind is towards a heavenly perspective, meaning you are after eternal things, and the heart of God is after eternal things, because people are in the heart of God and people are eternal. And so if you invest in those things, if you lay up your treasures in those eternal things, that's what will matter more. And this verse is not saying that you should give up your savings. No, that's not what it's saying. Because the Bible is also very clear that you should lay up an inheritance for the next generation, because God is a generational God. But where is your heart? First and foremost, that must take priority. Because if it's only going to be getting and accumulating for yourself, that's your focus for giving or for generosity, then you must have a different perspective about it. You must always think eternal. In verse 22, it continues on, "The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness?" And that's actually just an idiom in the Jewish culture about generosity as well. They're talking about good eye and bad eye. To have a good eye is that you have a good perspective about giving or being generous to others. If you have a bad eye, then it will be full of darkness for you, because there are even studies today that show that there's a direct link between generosity and happiness. And the Bible is way before those researches, but it already tells us here that if your giving is flowing in your life, if there is a flow of generosity in your life, if you are responding to God's generosity by also giving of your time, your talent, and your treasure, then your whole body will also be full of light. So that's what this verse is saying in context. And finally, in verse 24, it says here, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." So again, Jesus is saying we have a choice where to lay up our treasures. But he's also saying to us that, hey, this is where it matters more, in the eternal things. You know where you can lay up your treasures, where the heart of God is? It's actually in the church. You want to see where the heart of God is? Look for where he's moving. And definitely, I know that God is moving in the church, his body. And even here in this community that you're planted in New Life, if you call New Life your home, I believe that it's good to sow towards the church, not just your wealth, not just your finances, but even your time. You give to the Lord by serving, and again, everything is a response to him because he has already loved you and he has already given you. And I just want to end with this. Jesus actually preempts the audience and even us, because the question in your mind might be, okay, God, if I am going to give everything that I have towards eternal things, what about my needs? But the Bible actually very clearly also tells us that God cares for you, specifically for your personal needs. In the next few verses after verse 24, Jesus talks about how we are not supposed to worry anymore because We are more than flowers. We are more than the birds of the air. If God takes care of them, how much more He will take care of us? Why? Because if your mindset, if your perspective is for heaven, for eternal things, that, oh, I know this is the heart of God, and I understand that generosity is about trusting Him, and I understand that, He has also given me the ability to store the resources that He has given me, oh, then I don't have to worry about my needs because God has already taken care of them. And this chapter ends with this verse, but seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. God is not against us having things. He is against things having us. But again, when our heart, in our heart of hearts, our priority is seeking first His kingdom, seeking what is eternal, laying up our treasures for heaven, where it's incorruptible, where we know that it counts for eternity and it will go from generation to another, then we know that we can live generous and empowered lives.